loves the idea of parallel universes. Maybe it's the appeal of an ideal world where you have second chances and things turn out differently. An alternate reality where you do get into Hogwarts and the Star Wars prequels aren't made and you finally plug in your asymmetric computer code correctly on the first try. But is there really a place in science for such wistful speculation? I mean, if the universe is everything that there is, you can't have two versions of it, right? Otherwise, the pair would really be everything, and what you started off calling the universe wasn't. The problem here is terminology. Physicists speaking informally often say universe when they really mean observable universe. That is, the part of the whole universe that we've so far been able to see. And it's perfectly fine to talk about multiple different observable universes. For example, an alien near the edge of our observable universe will see parts of the whole universe that we can't yet see because the light hasn't had time to reach us yet. But that's a well-understood question and not what physicists normally talk about when they discuss multiple observable universes or multiverses. So let's cut to the chase. In physics, the word multiverse normally refers to one of three distinct and largely unrelated proposed physical models for the universe, none of which has been tested or confirmed by experiment, by the way. The three multiverse models are Type 1, bubble universes or baby black hole universes. This is the most straightforward kind of multiverse. The basic idea is that perhaps there are other parts of the universe which are so far away that we will never see them, or are inside black holes, so similarly we will never see them. This kind of model was created as an attempt to explain why our universe is so good at making stars and galaxies and black holes and life. As the argument goes, if each of these separate mutually unseeable bubbles in the universe had slightly different laws of physics, then by definition we could only exist in one that had the right physical laws to allow us to exist. Like, we have to live in a universe where the Earth could form, because if the Earth couldn't form, then we couldn't be here. If you're not convinced by this logic, don't worry too much. There's not yet any experimental evidence for this kind of multiverse. Multiverse Type 2, membranes and extra dimensions. Inspired in part by the inability of the mathematics of string theory to predict the right number of dimensions for the universe we observe, string theorists proposed the idea that perhaps what we think of as our universe is actually just a three-dimensional surface embedded within a larger super-universe with 9 spatial dimensions. Kind of like how each page of a newspaper is its own two-dimensional surface embedded within our three-dimensional world. And of course, if space had 9 dimensions rather than 3, there'd be plenty of space for other three-dimensional surfaces that appeared like ours to be universes in their own right, but, like the pages of a newspaper, were actually part of a bigger whole. These kinds of surfaces are called membranes, or branes for short, and as a reminder, there is not yet any experimental evidence for this kind of multiverse. Multiverse Type 3, the many worlds picture of quantum mechanics. Surprisingly, physicists still don't fully understand how the collapse of the wave function in quantum mechanics happens, and the many worlds hypothesis makes an attempt at explanation by proposing that every possible alternate timeline for the universe is real, and they all happen in an ever larger, ever-branching way. Like a universal choose-your-own-adventure where every possible story happens. If this were the case, we might not realize it because we'd be stuck living out just one of the infinitely many possible lives available to us. In some ways, Many Worlds is similar to the bubble multiverse model by proposing maybe anything that can does, and we just happen to exist in a series of happenings that were necessary for us to exist. If you're still not convinced by this logic, don't worry. There's not yet any experimental evidence for this kind of multiverse. Of course, if you want to get imaginative, you could also combine several of these models together into a multi-multiverse, a new super speculative model based itself on speculative and experimentally unconfirmed models. But that's not to say that we couldn't test these multiverse hypotheses. For example, if our observable universe were really just one of many disconnected bubbles or membranes, and if it happened to collide with another bubble or membrane sometime in the past, then that collision would certainly have had some sort of effect on what we see when we look up at the night sky. On the other hand, the many worlds interpretation might be tested fairly soon, since experimentalists are becoming increasingly able to manipulate and control ever larger quantum mechanical systems in their labs, systems that approach the line between the quantum realm and our everyday experience. So as always, we must remember that physics is science, not philosophy, and in our attempts to explain the universe that we observe, we have to make claims that can in principle be tested, and then test them.
You unlock this door with the key of imagination. Beyond it is another dimension.
Evidence of a parallel universe was put forth back in 2015. Now scientists believe they have uncovered evidence of not only a neighboring parallel universe, but one in which time runs backwards. According to the New York Post. Scientists conducting cosmic ray detection experiments in Antarctica have uncovered what they believe is evidence of a parallel universe where the laws of physics differ from our own. They reportedly detected high-energy particles rising out of Antarctica, which is contrary to how these particles are supposed to behave. They're supposedly only able to be detected when they come down from space. So, to detect them going up instead of down could imply that the particles were traveling backwards in time. That's the theory, at least. The New Scientist breaks down the possible discovery like this. That strange finding was made in 2016. Since then, all sorts of suggestions rooted in known physics have been put forward to account for the perplexing signal, and all have been ruled out. What's left is shocking in its implications. Explaining the signal requires the existence of a topsy-turvy universe created in the same Big Bang as our own and existing in parallel with it. In this mirror world, positive is negative, left is right, and time runs backwards. IGN can confirm the existence of this parallel, backwards universe. In fact, we have a satellite office there. We go now to No Meat. Cool. For all the news in the universe says, stay tuned, IGN.
And you can customize and save with Liberty Mutual. Shocking, right?
Uh-oh.
What if there are other universes just like ours, with an infinite number of Earths, with uncountable versions?
I guess I'll let this play. This is kind of my theory. I'll go into it
What
later.
if there are other universes just like ours, with an infinite number of Earths, with uncountable versions? And what if we don't have to look too far to find them? Maybe a mirror version of our reality is right here. This is What If. And here's what would happen if we could open a portal to a parallel universe. Our universe began when a small but very hot singularity exploded in the Big Bang 13.7 billion years ago. But maybe it wasn't the only one to be born then. In physics, space and time fuse into one four-dimensional continuum, space-time. If this space-time is flat and stretches far beyond the limits of our observation, there is a possibility that it holds uncountable, disconnected universes. But for all we know, there are a limited number of ways the particles in those other universes can be put together. At some point, the realities will have to start repeating themselves. That means, in theory, our reality is only a small part of what's out there. And someone just like you might be living in a parallel universe similar to our own. And that universe may be as close as a million trillion trillionth of a centimeter away. Although the wall between the universes might be incredibly small, traveling between them won't be easy, but it could be done. All you need is an 85 megawatt nuclear reactor capable of firing billions of neutrons on command. That's how a team of physicists working in Tennessee's Oak Ridge Laboratory are trying to open the gates of a mirror universe. Of course, they have to find it first. It all comes from a theory that says if you beam neutrons at a wall, none should pass through. If some do manage to make it to the other side, it would mean that they've transformed into mirror images of themselves as they went through the wall between the two worlds. How do we even know all that? Well, there's one odd thing about neutrons. In particle beams, on average, they last for 14 minutes and 48 seconds before they decay into protons. But if you place neutrons in a lab bottle, they'll break down 10 seconds faster. It's not something we can explain with physics yet. Neutrons are all the same, and there shouldn't be any 10-second difference in their lifespan, regardless of where they're stored. Could it be possible that the neutron experiments didn't go as expected because physicists accidentally opened a portal to a mirror world? That would be the first evidence that a mirror universe exists right next to our own. A mirror world with mirror atoms. Maybe even a mirror Earth. An entire mirror world, almost totally cut off from ours. Could you meet another version of yourself in that mirror world? Now, it gets a little complicated. Even though particle configurations can repeat themselves, the odds of finding a portal to a parallel universe that's exactly the same as ours are close to zero. Think about it. There are a novum vigintillion particles in the universe. That's the number 1 followed by 90 zeros. Every single one of them would need to have had the same interactions for 13.7 billion years to create an identical universe to what we have now. The mirror universe would most likely have its own mirror laws of physics, but it's hard to know for sure because nobody has detected a single mirror particle yet. Maybe we shouldn't be searching for answers in a lab. Perhaps we should be looking in space itself. Our universe is full of dark matter. We can't observe it directly, and we have no idea what it's made of or how it works, but we know that dark matter is strong enough to stop galaxies from flying apart. Yet, we can't find it. Perhaps the reason is that dark matter is leaking from a mirror world into ours. If we could detect that, it would confirm that a mirror universe exists. Because we know that there's 5 times more dark matter than there is visible matter in the universe, you've got to think that a mirror universe is much more massive than the one we live in. Even if we did manage to open up a gate into another world, the portal would be incredibly small. Too small for you to see anything without some very powerful lab equipment. We'd still be dealing with neutrons and protons, remember? You could only enter that realm if you had the ability to shrink yourself to the size of an atom. But that's a story for another What If.
Hello, this is Boyd from Airboyd, and we are still at CES this week. We are covering the Delta Airlines event, and specifically this morning I'm taking a look at the parallel reality experience that was briefed in yesterday's keynote. Delta CEO Ed Bastian highlighted the experience in a keynote in the morning, and they had a small video to go with it, and then this mock-up in their booth in the CES floor is in fact a fully working model. What they did was they gave us tickets. We got to choose where we were going from and to. In my case, I chose Tokyo, and it was also going to have my language being Japanese for the arrival, and obviously I put the channel name in. So the first room was basically a demonstration of how the technology worked. I always stood in front of a statue of the Eiffel Tower, and from where I was standing, I could see Paris. We were then invited to swap with our 3 other partners, 4 total people in the room, so that we could see what each other person was seeing based on their position in the room. And as of yet, we still have not scanned in our personal tickets, so we're just seeing a demonstration of how the technology works in this room. As I move over to the left, I go to Tokyo, continue on over to Mexico, and then I'm able to go back across to the other side and see the other cities. We were then invited to walk to the front of the room and take a look at how the positional system works, or at least visually depicted. What they had was a set of mirrors up in the back of the room, and the mirrors depict essentially the positions of what 12 people would be standing around and what their each individual view of the screen that they're looking at would look like. And as you can see, that the countries are represented along with the statues that would be standing behind. And then the video shows that each of the pictures can have something moving, static, or anything else like that. As they explained to us, this is the first time it's been deployed outside of the lab and shown to people. And this is really just a reference of what it would look like to have 12 people standing looking at the same screen, and how in each of their positions they're seeing something completely different. From there, we passed on into the next room, and the next room is where we're basically scanning in our boarding pass and continuing on our journey as we would in the airport. As we scan in our tickets, we look at the sign, and each of us is seeing a personalized sign just for us based on position. When we scanned in our ticket, the cameras and sensors in the room picked up where we are and began to follow us through the room. Now, the purpose of these screens is to be used for boarding, deplaning, and a number of other things. So, in this example, when I land in Tokyo, it says "Welcome to Tokyo" specifically to me, has a choice of languages and tells me where I'm going to get my personal bags. As I walk across the room here, I go and stand behind another person who identified himself as Chris for the purpose, and you can see that his name changes to Chris when I get within about 1 to 3 degrees of where he's standing. And then I move back off to the left again, and again, it's personalized just for me based on where I am in the room. Delta says this is scalable to hundreds of people, and apparently it only requires a few degrees off per person for this technology to work. And they're going to deploy it this summer in Detroit and start rolling it out throughout the state. Here's another view of the language selection for my flight. Because I was going to Tokyo, it offered me Japanese. I could have had a number of other languages as well. Again, this will display just for me and in the location that I'm standing in, and will follow me throughout the airport. Quite amazing technology. For those who remember the Minority Report ads that are customized for people, this is the same sort of science fiction that we're looking at seeing, but it's literally going to be deployed this summer in the Detroit airport, and eventually Delta hopes to have this rolled out pretty much everywhere in the system. A lot of the stuff they showed off at CES, they hope to have in airports and aircraft in the next 5 years. So a lot of amazing stuff coming out of CES this year. Again, thanks for watching, and I apologize. I do have a sore throat this week.
Okay, now some of the wicked stuff.
Hey guys, it's Jemima and welcome to my channel. So today guys, I want to share with you how to manifest through parallel realities. Now some of you are like, yeah, that's super cool, and others are like, what is this she got about? She's actually crazy. But let me just explain a little background and kind of how this all. So if you haven't already heard of the theory, quantum mechanics, or physics, well, anyway, they did this experiment called the slit experiment. It was basically when they're working with electrons and particles. So they had two slits. So when the camera was observing the electrons, they acted as particles. However, when no equipment was used to observe the electrons, they acted as waves and particles simultaneously. So if you're still like, I have no idea what that means, I'm going to link a documentary. It goes for like an hour. It's so interesting. It just kind of tells you everything you need to know, because there is so much information you kind of need to process, and it really helped me kind of get a bit more knowledge about all of this stuff. So go check that out. Now, the word parallel implies that, you know, there are different realities occurring and existing at the same time or in a similar way. And a lot of people believe that event A happens after event B and so on. But I believe that we're constantly jumping through one timeline to the next throughout the day, and the vibration at which you resonate is the reality that
Community
occurs. So,
society.
but do know every decision you make plays out in infinite ways. Each you believes that it is the real you, and that all the others are just different possibilities. And this really makes no difference, as your soul is aware of the infinite realities that are occurring right now. Okay, so first, I need you to know that nothing exists in the past, nothing exists in the future. The only thing that exists right now is the present moment. So, 0 come about, you have to take action. But also, feelings are very important. You know, before you go to bed, I recommend, I think I said this in my last video, writing out a thing you want to manifest or a reality you want in like a dream scenario, because when you're in a dream, you think it is the reality. And this morning I woke up, I had a very vivid dream, and for a split second I was like, I thought it was my reality. Like, I know that's crazy, but I'm sure some of you guys have had that experience. So, and I know dreams are like the subconscious, and right now this is our conscious being, but it is the same thing. So, I recommend before you go to bed or just after you wake up, write it in a dream scenario. Be in the now. Think of it as your reality. Say if you wanted your dream job and you know where the location is, drive to that location. Go in the building. Feel what it feels like. And that's gonna like imprint in your brain that it is your reality. And you're gonna start to see the changes. You're gonna start to see things manifest and become a reality. I hope this video has helped you guys. I am just totally in love with this. And well done you for even being here watching this topic, because it is something that a lot of humans shut off. A lot of people don't want to hear about it. They have fear of the unknown, but it's super cool that you're actually watching this. And please, do share it, because people actually do find this stuff very interesting. And I am gonna link that documentary below, so please do watch that because it's so interesting. But anyway, guys, if this video did help, please give it a big thumbs up, hit subscribe, share it, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.
Oh no, I did not even intend on playing that whole.
Errands should be fun too. Put some. When we see Pleiadian shapes.
They are a
That's
solid
crazy.
object. I'm actually looking at moving and vibrating energy. So for me, the multiple dimensional realities of this one reality we're living, it looks like it blends together essentially. It's not, the third dimension is not as solid for me as it is for most people.
No, I really love that perspective, and it's such an important awareness if we're going to get out of the density of material, sort of a dead end that we've taken because we think this is the only level of reality that exists. I mean, the mainstream. So in order to at least present another perspective, we need this awareness. But how were you able to come in so? I mean, maybe there's no answer for how, but what was it about you that came in so conscious of this?
It's just an intention. See, a lot of people would like to believe that I achieved some like supreme level of being before doing this, but the reality is that my perspective is no more valuable than the perspective of somebody who is, so to speak, stuck in a physical perspective. Because all perspectives are infinitely valuable to the universal consciousness. So what it was that I came in with the intention of being this way, with the intention of not forgetting the multidimensional energetic nature of this universe, because of both the expansion that would cause me and because of universal asking. So the universal asking of most beings, even especially in the 60s, which were the parents which brought me in, was that there was a desire for humankind to know itself, a desire for humankind to touch its true essence. And so quite often that's realized through the next generation, which is why you see this giant boom of indigo children, this boom of in-touch individuals, many of whom have what mainstream science would call autistic spectrum disorders, but in reality it is a group of energy conscious beings who cannot fit into society because they cannot shut off their multidimensional faculties.
Right, so you came in with an awareness of these multidimensional aspects, in a sense, on behalf of the universe or consciousness itself, I would think. And so what are you aware of? Because I feel like your awareness and things perhaps that you haven't even told your audience are valuable for shifting who we think we were and are moving into. So I'm curious of your, really out there perspectives in some ways, if you don't mind.
I don't know what they are. This is sort of the issue. When you're in the perspective, it's kind of difficult to see how it differs from other people's perspectives.
Well, just to see the bedpost as not a solid object and to know that it's a shifting vibration, I'm sure you're aware of other things that maybe you think are common to most people, but when you look at them and see their belief systems, you realize, wow, they don't have that.
Well, I'm not restricted to my perspective. It
Right.
gets very hazy, reality versus non-reality. Of course, whatever that meaning is, it gets very hazy when you're able to remove your consciousness from your physical perspective. When you withdraw your consciousness, you are now unlimited by space and time. You are able to travel to anywhere that your intention wants to go and to access that type of a reality with as much extreme real feeling as you would this third dimensional reality. So
So no, that's good. I'm getting what you're saying. So are you aware of the other levels, planes, timelines, thought
Yes.
form, and what can you like say to us right now in relationship to some of those other awarenesses? I mean, what's happening there?
oh my god.
Are you like bowling or something? No, I'm kidding. But, no, what are you doing? What's happening on those other planes as you? I mean, you're here in this timeline dimension, but there's other levels. I'm just curious what goes on there for you from your perspective. Like,
It's different based on each dimension, and I could essentially write a novel on each one, probably multiple novels on each one of these realities. But let's just say,
I mean, are you doing a similar job in some of these other as a spiritual catalyst, or are
yes, in fact, my 10th dimensional aspect is the most active. So quite often, what you'll notice when people go out of body is they have experiences where they run into what they usually identify as angels or spirit guides that talk to them. They're the ones who meet them out of body and say, you have the option to go back into your body if you'd like to, right? You've all heard those experiences. My 10th dimensional aspect, a great many times, is doing that with people. So I'm the one they're actually meeting out of body. And I can do that simultaneously as I'm sitting here talking to you.
you have full, not full conscious, but you have an awareness of that.
Oh yeah, I have full consciousness, meaning that I can do both at once. It's just about where I'm switching my focus. It's like right now you could either look at the computer screen or you could look at the wall behind the computer screen. That is as easy as it is for me to switch my consciousness between having this conversation or completely focusing on the other relationships that I'm having on multiple dimensional realities.
Do you think there's a facility of our human brain that turns on in order to have those multidimensional awarenesses?
No, in fact, I think it's a portion of our brain that turns off in order to have those multidimensional experiences.
Okay, that's good. So do you call this plane the teal swan plane, the third dimension?
Yes.
And so what else are you? So where's the 10th dimension? What's happening, like let's say, on the 4th or 5th, 6th dimension of reality?
Fourth dimension, I am observing myself. Fifth dimension, I'm actually interacting with my own thought forms. That means that as I live my physical third dimensional experience here, say we're having a conversation, the feeling of this conversation is translating to symbolic images, which are constructs of mine, and that takes place on a fifth dimensional level and up into the sixth dimensional level. And so the self that is there is interacting with those symbols.
And on the 7th level and 8th and 9th, what?
Oh man, this is super complicated to sum up. Okay,
Okay, we have as much time as you want to, because I think it's fascinating because you're actually really defining the parameters as you see it for these multidimensional realities. I'm very interested. So yeah.
okay. Once you get to the seventh dimensional reality, what's happening is multiple timelines. So I'm able to access relative to this life. I'm able to access multiple timeline potentials. So on the sixth dimensional reality, we're aware of me making a decision right now could have made it so that I was in a completely different location. So one timeline, let's say I already died, but simultaneously, here I am talking to you.
Right. And there's how many different timelines? Are there an infinite amount of timelines?
Not on the sixth dimension. There's usually only, it's like 1 to 3.
Okay. And then if we get to the 7th dimension, what's happening there?
That
inside that building, you see how everyone's sort of living inside that. Like each one of those apartments are different lifetime flows, and you're seeing the whole picture from outside of it. Would you say that's what they mentioned?
Yes, and once we start bridging the eighth, ninth dimensional reality, what we're using those numbers to assign, essentially what you're getting into is this idea essentially that like there's not just one being that has a timeline, it's also collective consciousness that has a timeline. So you're able to access that. And so as we move up, you'll notice that the closer that you get to the 11th dimension, the more that you see, it basically connects one universe to the other universe. So here you have like a ninth dimensional reality. In a ninth dimensional reality, what you have is basically one universe now and all the potential timelines of that one universe, right? So where is there to go from there? From there, you go to the 10th dimensional reality. In the 10th dimensional reality, you're connecting all of the potential timelines that are happening in multiple universes. So you're connecting one universe to another universe, right?
Right.
So now this is not the only universe, but the other universe is also this. And of course that universe operates according to completely different rules from this one. So even trying to explain that with physical human language is not going to work, because we understand that even our language is set up around our experience of physical Earth. So we understand gravity, what is not gravity, right?
Because y'all ain't doing
What's
shit.
like pure light and color and feeling. And,
Working
yeah,
on.
I get it. So that was what level? Yeah.
Well, that's essentially, that's ninth and up, like you're starting to bridge the 10th. So, ninth bridging 10th. Once you get to the 10th dimensional reality, is when you've got, so ninth dimensional reality's got one universe is now, you've exhausted all possible timelines, all possible potentials in that one universe. And then, so there has to be a second point where you get another universe. Up into the 10th dimensional reality, you have all the multiple timelines for that universe. Essentially, you're in the 12th dimension literally represents universal consciousness. So we could consider that source. That is everything, all possible timelines that have ever existed as a single point, right? Within a the 12th dimension. But in the 11th dimensional reality, you're connecting every possible timeline from it. But that's where you still have the definition. Once you get to the 12th dimensional reality, there is no definition, because that entire thing I just said, all the systems that are connected to each other, the one universe and all the timelines in that universe connecting to every other universe in those timelines, all of those things are treated as a single point, as a singularity, essentially, with no boundaries.
And you still have that awareness as well, because that's essentially who we all are anyway. Right?
Yes.
So, but that's the awareness that sort of branches out and becomes all of this on whatever level of manifestation we exist.
Yes.
But in your awareness, you still are there, and you have a really clear sense of being there. Is that true?
Yes. Well, from that perspective, it's not just that I am there and I am also here. From that perspective, I am everything that exists. So I am ultimately every single timeline, every single potential in every single universe that has ever existed. I have just forgotten it because my focus is temporarily oriented towards this individual perspective that I call by my name.
But you haven't completely forgotten it, which is what makes you a spiritual catalyst.
Yes.
But I mean, I think it's fascinating that you have this awareness in all these dimensions, and yet you're also in the human body, living out the human experience, having relationships and situations, whatever comes up. And I mean, how do you put all that together? I mean, just sure.
Not gracefully.
Not
Gracefully.
Why? What's not graceful about it?
The dichotomy between the illusion of this physical dimension, which is really essentially what it is, it's a mirror hologram. It's just a hologram that was created for learning, and the realities of the universe. It's like a desperate clash. And that's how it was designed. This is the contrast that was designed to help us know what we truly are. It's kind of like you can't know black unless you know white. So you can't know oneness unless you know separation to its utmost extreme. And physical reality is as separate as it gets so far. So we're limited to this perspective, which is an extreme amount of pain. I mean, that's part of why it's so valuable for me, I think, to be teaching this other perspective, because of the amount of pain that the illusion of the separation creates in people.
What do you mean by pain? I mean, can you be more specific?
If your true essence is that of oneness, to be separated into an ego, which is nothing but a separate sense of self, is acutely painful. Most of us get so used to it that we forget that that's an aspect of pain. It's like we don't really know how painful it is to be pulled on by gravity all day long, because we
Play in an experiment or a
This
test
is
of our
another one.
illusion of separateness. Doesn't that help kill the pain a little bit, or divert, or not take it so serious?
President Trump is protecting pre-existing conditions. Prescription
Today on TLDR from GeekWire. A GeekWire exclusive on Parallel Reality. A super fast drone that delivers life-saving supplies in Rwanda. And the Washington governor's response to Trump's anti-Amazon tweet. From GeekWire, it's TLDR, your daily rundown on all things tech. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Our first story today is about parallel reality. Now let me give you an example to show you how parallel reality works. Imagine you're at the airport and you're looking up at the big screen to find your gate. But instead of seeing everyone's gate for everyone's flight, you only see your gate for your flight. Now imagine another traveler is looking at the same screen at the same time. They'll only see their gate for their flight as well. It's completely personalized. Pretty cool, right? It might sound far off, but the Redmond, Washington-based company Misapplied Sciences has already developed the underlying technology that can make this possible. And here's a big plus. You don't need a set of bulky goggles for this. It works with the naked eye. Their display technology relies on what they call a magic pixel. Basically, with traditional display technology, a pixel will give off one color of light, but in all directions. But with a multi-view pixel, it can send different colors of light in millions of directions. That's mind-blowing, and it could completely change advertising. When you think about location technology and sensors, the possibilities are really endless, and people can do all sorts of things. Like, imagine buying a personalized message in Times Square.
We try to look at the whole universe itself. Many people ask the question, well, Professor, how do you know? How do you know that the universe is expanding? How do you know that it came from a Big Bang? When you project so far into the future, billions to trillions of years into the future? Well, one way we do this is by looking at the Doppler shift. Now, the Doppler shift is something that even children are familiar with. When children play Star Wars with each other, they go with their rocket ships, right? Well, what makes that sound? It's the Doppler effect. When a car moves toward you, the pitch is higher. When the car moves away from you, the pitch is lower. And it sounds like this. We've all heard it. Same thing with starlight. When yellow light moves toward you, it turns greenish and bluish. When the yellow light moves away from you, it turns reddish. Now, how can you memorize this? Well, I was reading a paper a few years ago, and I read this fascinating story of a high school physics teacher who got a speeding ticket for running a red light. The physics teacher went to the blackboard and said, Your Honor, my car was moving toward yellow. Light is compressed in the forward direction when you move toward it, and therefore it turned green. This is the Doppler shift, he said, and he went to the blackboard and he correctly wrote down all the equations of the Doppler shift. And then this high school physics teacher said, Your Honor, I do not deserve a traffic ticket. Well, the judge scratched his head, and according to the article, the judge said, well, I guess there is a law higher than the laws of the state of New Jersey. These are the laws of physics. But then, according to the article, there was a high school kid in the courtroom, and he raised his hand. And he said, Your Honor, I'm just a high school kid, but I happen to be in his high school physics class. And he just talked weeks ago, that this only happens when you approach the speed of light. End of article. To this day, I still don't know what happened to that poor high school kid.
The fucking
Michael
neighborhood
Myers
Upland Avenue was
that
a
if I'm
problem.
ever in court
Child is a
arguing a
problem as
speeding
fuck
ticket or
in
red
that
light,
neighborhood.
they better not
I
raise
want
their
all y'all
hands if they
dead.
know what's good for them and they know what's good for their grades. So, when we look in the heavens, we look at starlight emitted from distant galaxies, and we find that the light is slightly reddish, redder than it's supposed to be. That means that these objects, these gigantic galaxies, are moving away from us, and therefore the universe is expanding. Well, we can run the videotape backwards. And by running the videotape backwards, we can then calculate when all these galaxies came from a single point. And that's how we calculate the age of the universe, by simply hitting the rewind button when we calculate the expansion of the universe. So by running the videotape backwards, we see that the universe is about 13.7 billion years old, plus or minus 1%. So we now know the age of the universe, 13.7 billion years, by running the videotape backwards. But what happens if we hit fast forward? What happens if we go forward in time billions of years? Well, here it gets murkier. But by analyzing how the universe has been expanding in the past, we used to think that the universe is slowing down. We used to think the universe is aging and therefore it's slowing down, running out of steam. Wrong. We now believe that the universe is speeding up. It's actually accelerating. It's in runaway mode, which means that instead of dying in a big crunch, we'll probably die in a big freeze. We're not positive. We don't know if this will keep on millions of years. But if so, the universe is in a runaway mode. It means that one day, perhaps when we look at the night sky, perhaps we'll see almost nothing, because the distant galaxies are so far that light cannot even reach our telescopes. Not a pleasant thought, but our universe may eventually die in a big freeze rather than a big crunch. Nobody knows when this big freeze will take place or if it will ever take place. However, estimates have been made, perhaps hundreds of billions of years, perhaps trillions of years. One day it'll get so cold that you look at the night sky and it'll be almost totally black. All the stars will have exhausted all their nuclear fuel. The universe will consist of neutron stars, dead black holes. The temperature will reach near absolute zero. And at that point, even consciousness, even thought itself cannot exist. And some people think that perhaps the laws of physics are a death warrant to all intelligent life, that we're all going to die when the universe freezes over. But you know, there's a loophole. There's a loophole in the laws of physics. You see, trillions of years from now, perhaps intelligent life will be able to master what is called the Planck energy. The Planck energy is the ultimate energy. It's the energy of the Big Bang. It's the energy at which gravity itself begins to break down. You know that if you have a microwave oven and you heat it up, you can take ordinary water and make it boil. Ice can melt, water can boil. But what happens if you crank up that microwave oven even more? Eventually the steam starts to break up into oxygen and hydrogen. You crank it up some more, all of a sudden ions form. Atoms themselves begin to rip apart. And then if you crank up that microwave oven even more, then even the nucleus begins to break apart and you get a plasma of protons and neutrons. You crank it up some more, and you put gluon plasma. And if you crank it up some more to this incredible energy, 10 to the 19 billion electron volts, we're not sure, but perhaps even space itself begins to boil. Even space-time becomes unstable. Bubbles begin to form at this Planck energy. And perhaps it's gateways to a parallel universe. Now, of course, we're not, this is sheer speculation, but there are theories which say that there could be universes right next to our universe. And in fact, the Large Hadron Collider will give us the first experimental evidence about the existence of parallel universes. So think of us as ants living on a sheet of paper. But perhaps there are other parallel sheets of paper with other ants living on them. And perhaps we are very close to these other universes, but we can't reach them. The energy necessary to reach a parallel universe would be the Planck energy, 10 to the 19 billion electron volts. I would suppose that trillions of years from now, intelligent life, facing the ultimate demise of the universe itself, might decide to leave the universe, to leave our universe and enter a parallel universe in the same way that Alice entered the Looking Glass to enter Wonderland.
Welcome back to another video. My name is Aaron and I help people expand their consciousness. Now in this video, I'll be sharing with you 3 signs that you have shifted to a parallel reality.
Okay, keep in mind all this parallel reality and meditation, you know, being your greatest version of you, took place around the same time that they opened up that Stargate. Like, it was a big boom in those areas or fields of interest.
Now, this video will help you understand the idea of parallel realities in a much deeper way, while also giving you practical tools to being able to become the best version of yourself. Now, with this idea of parallel reality, let me first off explain the context so that we understand exactly the whole basis of what I'm saying. The idea behind parallel realities and what science and quantum physics is starting to learn more and more every day is that there are an infinite number of parallel realities. The easiest way to understand parallel realities is to think about it in the form of a movie strip analogy. Now, the idea is that in the movie strip, what you can see is a whole bunch of individual frames if you take out that film strip. Now, if you were to put it and play a movie, the frames would be moving so quick that you would see a continuity and a storyline with it. Now, the idea is that there are an infinite number of parallel realities that exist, and the idea is that we are constantly shifting between different parallel realities, and what we think of as continuity is something that we have because we live in a time-space linear reality. But the idea is that any movement that we are able to see whatsoever is a completely separate frame. Now, the power of this is also knowing that the only moment that exists is this moment right now. Now, the power of this is knowing that we can't actually experience what we call the past, because when it was the past, it was this moment right now. We can only imagine it using our memory or our brain. The idea is that from the future point of view, we can imagine the future using our brain, but the idea is that we can only do that from this moment right now. Now, this means that in this moment right now, any possible parallel reality that you can imagine exists. And the idea behind it, and what I've shared in prior videos, is that if you want to experience the preferred parallel reality, like the perfect version of yourself, what you can do is imagine the best version of yourself and how you would be acting. Imagine your body language, the kind of books that you would read, what you would be doing for a living, the kind of people you hang around, your morning ritual, all of those things, and start to model those things and start to mirror that version of you. Take on the belief systems of that version of you, the daily habits, everything about it. As you do that, what you are doing is shifting yourself closer and closer to that being who you are being, and therefore, eventually, you will get that reflection in your life. Now, with all that being said, the first sign that you have shifted to a parallel reality is that you experience any type of movement whatsoever. Now, the reason I say this is so that you come to understand that it's a natural byproduct of who we are. It's not something we have to try to do. The idea is that if there's something we want to really create in our life, that we create a bigger degree of change between what we're experiencing right now and who we prefer to be and what we want to experience. Now, the idea is that me going like this right now is shifting through a whole bunch of parallel realities, but it looks like one continuous stream because we have the memory to see and link them together. Now, With this, it comes with understanding that the best version of yourself exists right now in this moment, and that what you can begin to learn to do from this is how to embody the best version of yourself, and knowing that that exists right now. It's simply a degree of can you become that version of yourself to then get that reality. Now, the second sign I have for you is that you are able to see some type of change in the past of something that you thought it was the way it was, but it's actually different. Now, they've used examples of this before, of the whole Bernstein Bears example, where we thought it was spelt one way, and then we look back on it and see it was spelt completely different. And there are other examples of this as well, but the idea is that as we change in the present moment, the past to who we are being is also changing. When we could also think of this in the form of the neural networks in our brains are relating to past experiences in a completely different way. And as we change in the present moment, we are changing our past. Now, the power of this is knowing that we can learn to let go of the past that is holding us back. We can really let go of any story that holds ourselves back by knowing that the only thing that connects that story to us is our memory of it, of us keep on thinking about it over and over again, and that's what keeps the pattern alive, which then influences the pattern of who we are being in the present moment, especially if we are identified with it. Now, what they've also showed with neuroscience is that anytime we remember something from the past, what we do is we take that memory out of the memory bank, we look at it, and as we look at it, we change it, even if it's just a little bit. And the idea is that when we put it back in the memory bank, it is different than it was before. And the idea is that over years of doing this, it might actually be completely different than what it was to begin with. So the power of this is knowing that the past is only having power over us if we believe it does, and if we are attached to that. Now, the third sign has to do with a break in continuity that may not be explainable. Now, this is something that happened to me about 5 to 7 years ago. I remember I was going to the gym. I was driving on my way to the gym, and I had to get into a left turn lane. And when I went to the left turn lane, I was driving, and all of a sudden, a big semi-truck started to merge over, and I remember it was going to merge and crush me, like right into the median that was right to the left of me. And all of a sudden, I remember knowing that it was going to hit me, and all of a sudden, there was like a jolt, and then I was behind the truck, like considerably behind it. And I remember that I always looked at that, and I wondered what happened in that state and in that scenario. But what that could have been was from a higher level or from some type of understanding, I shifted to a parallel reality where that didn't happen, and which means that there is a parallel reality where that did happen, and maybe I died. I'm not quite sure. But the idea is that anytime we experience a large jolt or a spark of discontinuity, something that is unexplainable, that may have been us shifting to a parallel reality where it is different than it would have been. This could easily also be understandable from what many people call an NDE or a near-death experience, from where maybe in one reality they really would have died, but what happened was is from a higher level they've decided that they want to keep on living their life, and that's when they shifted to the parallel reality that was so similar of where they are still alive. So these three signs can help you understand parallel realities in a much more powerful way, and also help you transform who you're being in the present moment to really embody who you prefer to be and really let go of the story that we might be telling ourselves. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video.
That's why my brother don't know who he is.
From the Neuralink computing device shows the pig's brain activity as its nubble. A secretive other startup, Neuralink, which is trying to build an interface between human brains and computers. With a device surgically implanted in the skull of a pig named Gertrude, Elon Musk demonstrated his startup Neuralink technology to build a digital link between brains and computers. A wireless link from the Neuralink pad that fits into a small cavity hollowed out of the skull. Tiny electrode threads penetrate is to head off a future where artificial intelligence, vastly smarter than humans, exterminates us. Musk envisions people using Neuralink I think Costco is so powerful that being the only credit card provider in Costco is so valuable that they should have thrown away the rule book. But that's just my opinion.
They gonna know something happened at this other place and one they're gonna be able to control her ass. So you realize stuff like this is nothing but the devil.